Man-Made is a series looking into the journey of becoming a man, and not just any man, a good man. I've found those two words together bring up a very rich discussion. It is not a benign endeavor to seek these two questions. What does it mean to be a good man? And what are the pathways in becoming one? In this series, I'm talking with men from all walks of life, professions, locations, ages, races, political, and spiritual beliefs. This group of men crossed my path in different ways. Some I found, some men were recommended to me, and a few sought me out themselves. When it came time for the men to commit to the interview, I asked the men this: to only represent his experience, his beliefs, and his thoughts. And the hope is that collectively, all these interviews with these good men and their stories form a powerful story that takes us into a private view of what it's like to be a good man in this day and age. Welcome to Man-Made, my conversations with good men. Today I'm speaking to Jairek Robbins. He's a performance coach and motivational speaker. He helps businesses, brands, and individuals achieve rapid, measurable improvements in work and life through speaking, business coaching, and his book, Live It, Achieve Success by Living with Purpose. Jairek is a son, a husband, and a gentle soul, and I had the privilege of speaking to him for over an hour. I hadn't met Jairek before we spoke, and I wasn't sure really what his personality would be like in an interview or even where our conversation was going to go. We just met online, said yes to the interview, and started going into our conversation, and it was magical. We start off talking about the transition of a boy becoming a man. Jairek speaks about his journey, what he's seen across the world in his travels, and the points that he finds important in the journey of becoming a man for any boy. We end the conversation focusing on the part of a man who partners with somebody in life. What makes a good man partnering? I wasn't expecting us to go there, but was fascinated by his insight and his advice. We ended up not talking specifically about the definition of a good man, and you'll see why. You will want to take notes, complete the exercises and writing prompts that he describes, and read the books he recommends. I know I did. I actually found myself more silent than I am in other interviews as I was gobbling up his wisdom and tips, and ended up listening more than talking and processing it after we got off the call. I even called a few people afterwards and said, what do you think about this part? Or which one are you? This one type or this type? And I even went back and changed an article that I was writing based on something that he had said. Hi, this is Dr. Juliana, and thank you so much for joining me for another interview with a wonderful man for my male series. And I'd like to welcome Jairek Robbins today. Hi, Jairek.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you so much for saying yes to this. I know it's in a way a leap of faith. And I was just so thrilled that when I reached out to you that you were a yes in this process.
Of course. I love sharing. So I figure I care about people and I always want them to get better. So I'm always willing to share with them. So I'm curious to see where this conversation goes, but excited to hopefully share something useful.
Great. Well, I when I was looking for who I wanted to interview and who I wanted to ask, here's someone I've been following for a couple years. And two things that stood out to me the most. One was the relationship that you have with your wife and how you put that out there and what you all share and how you all are supportive of each other in your journeys and your personal journeys and in your career journeys. And then your supportive, positive way of inspiring people out in the world. Those two things really drew me in.
Oh, very cool. Thank you.
So I was happy to know that you were willing to put your voice into the topic of the journey of becoming a man. Mm-hmm. So my first question to you is, how would you describe what it means to be a man?
Good question. So what it means to be a man, I think changes over time. It certainly changed for me over time. And I'll just share personal experience if that could be helpful. Yeah. I think when I was younger, due to circumstance, I was growing up in a situation where a lot of the men in my family were very good at certain parts of being a man and not so great at other parts of being a man. And so through observation, I got to see moments where they would protect and defend and care for the ones they love and be there for them and be very supportive and hear them and see them and listen to them and connect with them. And then I got to see moments where they would disconnect and they would lose their temper and they would become violent or aggressive or loud. And I was told stuff by the women in my family of, don't turn out like them. And I was like, oh. And so it was interesting. As a younger man, I was always told that being nice and being kind and being gentle and being giving and loving and caring and listening and feeling were all really good things for, a man to be. And then I was told being aggressive and being strong and being loud were not as good things. And whether they said that directly or they said that unintentionally through what they acknowledged and appreciated and what they disrespected and or shunned, it kind of taught that to me at a young age. So I was a very nice boy. And, my dad watched me and said, oh crap, he's headed to get his butt kicked if he goes into school being a nice boy to everybody. Because there's a lot of other guys that aren't nice boys. Like they're mean kids and they're strong. Luckily I was a big kid. So I didn't have a problem with most of them because I was bigger than all of them, knock on wood. And I was a nice kid. So I helped a lot of people and cared about a lot of people. If I fast forward that, I remember there was pivotal moments where things started to change, and it was through learning. It was through, I always call it giving myself a personal PhD on the subject and just studying like crazy and learning, what does this really mean? How does it really apply? And I remember a few different books that helped. There was a book called, what was it called? The Way to the Superior Man.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that was interesting because it talked about how we all wear masks, and I could instantly relate to all those masks because I was like, oh, so I'm a masculine boy who was taught to never be loud or aggressive because that's not good. That's interesting. So I put on a soft mask. But then I got to school, and I remember these other kids I used to play basketball with and dodgeball with, and they were really aggressive. And I was like, wow, if I'm just a nice guy, I'm going to get my ass kicked. Excuse the language. So I learned how to be really aggressive and strong in those situations. But then I try to talk to a girl and if you're too aggressive, they cry. So I'm like, oh, crap, that didn't work either. So then you had to be a nice guy again. And 12, 13, 14, 27 masks later, I was like, oh, shoot, I got to peel these back. Now I remember at that stage of life, little things that were confusing. Like you call someone and say, hey, do you want to go on a date? And they're like, oh, yeah, sure. What do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know. What would make you happy? And then they're like, yeah, never mind.
I want you to take charge.
Yeah. And you're like, what the heck does that mean? And this is teenage years and late teens, early 20s, and just learning what those things mean and learning like you have to be a freight train going from station A to station B, and whether the person wants to come with you, wonderful. If they don't, you still go because you enjoy the process, and learning these things and being like, oh, interesting. You're supposed to have a mission and a purpose and something you're doing with your life. Fast forward, there was another program I listened to. It was a guy, he turned out to be a friend of mine later in life, but he created a program called On Being a Man. Mm-hmm. And I remember listening to it. And one thing he said is there's a tradition, I think it's the Maasai tribe, where when a boy is in his teens, like 13 years old, they have a ritual to transition this boy into being a man. And so what they do is at 13, all the men get together, they paint their faces and act like they're kidnappers, and they sneak in to the hut. The way the Maasai tribe works, I like this example because it's kind of neat to see, is there's a circle like this where the fence is, if you can see that little circle.
Yeah.
And then they put the cows in a little inner circle here. So sorry, my cow-like creature, that's moo. There's a cow in the middle there. And then the women and children sleep in the little houses that they build within this thicket fence. And then in the Maasai tribe, the men sleep outside the fence to protect the village against lions. And so the boys sleep on the inside, but the men sleep on the outside. I'm like, that's interesting. And so the men, when a boy is ready to become a man, sneak in, they kidnap a boy, they grab him by his ankles, rip him out of the hut, put a bag over his head, tie him up, and drag him out to the middle of the forest at 2:30 in the morning. And the women scream bloody murder as if he's been literally kidnapped. And they're like, no, don't kill him, please, no. And so they drag this kid out to the middle of the forest. And this kid's heart's racing. He feels like he's going to die. Someone just kidnapped them. He doesn't know who they are. They take the bag off his head. It's like his uncle, his cousin, his grandfather. He's like, oh my God, thank God I'm not going to die. But then the ritual starts. And the ritual is for the next 12 months, you have to live in the forest by yourself and learn how to get food and learn how to protect yourself against the elements. And you're not allowed to come back to the village until 12 months is up. And the final task you have to do is kill a lion by hand and then bring it home. And when you can do that and you bring it home, 13 years old, I remember my dad and I went and visited the Maasai, and when they told us this, he elbowed me and said, ready to become a man? I looked at him like, are you ready to become a man? Like, you can go live in the freaking forest and kill a lion by hand. Good luck. We were laughing about it. And so at 13, you figure out how to kill a lion by hand, bring it home. And the thought of like, well, what happens if it doesn't survive? And it's like, well, if he couldn't survive on his own, how in the world could he help take care of the village? Which is a really interesting concept, because if he couldn't find his own food and he couldn't protect himself, how could he find food for the village, and how could he protect the village? Which is really interesting. And it's just old school, really ingrained, simple things that are still part of societies in different parts of the world. So I remember hearing that. And then there was a phrase in this guy's program where it said, the boy must die for the man to live. And so something that's interesting is when the boy comes back to the village, he's given a new name, there's a new ceremony, and he'll never be referred to as the boy he once was ever again in his entire life. From that point forward, he has a new name of who he is, and he is now a man in the village. He now sleeps outside of the fence. And now that he's sleeping outside of the fence out here, he's now considered a man. And he has a new set of duties and a new responsibilities and a new way he has to show up in the world from that point forward.
Wow.
And I remember thinking in my world, what does that mean to me? Because obviously I don't have to go live in the forest or hunt down a lion by hand at 13 to become a man in this society. And I thought about it. I'm like, what are the rituals in modern day society of how we bring a man from boyhood into being a man? And I was like, I don't really know of any. I mean, the closest thing, just watching friends and how their family or friends or community did it, is they went to a strip club, they got them drunk, they did none of these things that actually prepared them for being a man. They did random stuff that just said, good luck, pal, you've transitioned. Hold on tight and see what happens. And what I've noticed is for a lot of men nowadays, the boy never died. So they're old boys. And they still do all the behaviors that they did as a youth, but they do it now grown up at 50 something years old, married with 2 kids, and wonder why things are struggling so much. They never evolved. I think another thing that transitioned was when I realized moving further along, I had a bout where I was out having fun, dating lots of people and enjoying myself and getting to know all kinds of wonderful humans. And in the process, I remember understanding and realizing the difference between a man dating and a woman having a relationship.
Ooh, that's good.
And I remember realizing, wow. And it was a woman who taught this program. And I remember listening to this part where it said, for a woman, if you ask for her number, you've started a relationship. It would be more respectful to call her and say, hey, it was great meeting you. I thought about it. Probably not going to call you again. I just wanted to call and let you know. It'd be more respectful for her to do that than to never call her. Because by never calling her, you started a relationship and gave her no closing, and therefore it will always be on her mind in some way, shape, or form, and cause her to doubt herself and cause all kinds of crap to come up in her head, good or bad. It just stirs up so much, versus to take responsibility and realize a man can date and go from person to person to person and be like, yeah, they're all wonderful. We had a great time together. But a woman builds a relationship, and she teases, she goes, how quickly do women build relationship? Well, if you two pull up to the same stop sign, there's a chance a relationship has just been formed. And there's weird truth in these things. And it's like, oh boy. And men don't realize this. And so from becoming a boy to becoming a man, allowing the boy who's there to take, to get, and becoming a man who's there to give and to serve. And it's like, oh my God, what does that even mean? And how does that relate to sexuality? How does that relate to, physical relationships? And it's like, as a boy, the goal becomes, what can I get out of this? Can I feel good? Can I get something? And the transition fully as a man, it's, hey, what can I share with this human? And it changes the entire dynamic of every relationship you have from that point forward in your life. because it's no longer about what you can get out of it, but the whole goal becomes what can you give to it.
Yeah.
And so in that deep transition, it's really asking the question, number one, what do I have abundance of in my life that I value, that I think is important? And number two, who is someone that I would like to share that with, and do they even value it? Because if you go, hey, here's what I want to share with this person, and they're like, no, thanks, I'm not interested. And you're like, but you have to be because you're hot and my hormones say that we must procreate.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you're creatively taking, you're trying to pretend like you're trying to give something, but it's the easiest to question to realize for people who are trying to find someone that's ready to get married. Just ask them, what do you want to share most with a human? And if they go, what do you mean? They're not ready to get married because they're still trying to get something from you. They're not trying to give something to you. And if they say that's what they want to give, say, okay, great. Where else do you share this in your world? Now, women like to believe, and this is just a guess, but I've heard it a bunch, which is, I want to be special. I want to know that the thing he wants to share most, he only wants to share with me. I hate to say it, but if this is what he wants to share most with the world, he will be sharing it everywhere. And that's how you'll know it's really what he wants to share, not some bent, proportioned version of himself he's pretending to put together just to pick you up.
How old were you when you could answer that question?
Oof. So I just took you from 15 years old to about 30 years old. So there's a 15-year gap of time of all this stuff coming into my mind and going, oh, crap. And royally screwing it up at times. Like knowing better, but messing up and going, oh, no, I knew better than that, which is learning. And so just because someone knows this stuff also doesn't mean they're ready. I found that out a bunch of times. And the worst thing you hear a man say is, well, if the right person came around, I would totally be ready. No, they're either ready or they're not, regardless if the person is there or not. And that sucks because then, again, someone likes to feel special and unique and say, oh my gosh, I'm the right person. I showed up in his life and all of a sudden he was ready. It's like, no bullshit. He's pretending to be ready. And you're going to find out either 6 months or 6 years from now how unready he really was. And that sucks.
Yes.
I think there's another piece that happens, which is men have two perspectives when they enter into a relationship, especially right around their 30s. So 25 to 35, if you want to give it range. And the perspective is either A, I need to build everything necessary to take care of someone and then find someone to share it with, or B, I need to find someone to help build this together with me. If he has the A personality, I need to build it first. He might build with you for 15, 20 years. And then once it's ready, kick you out to find the person to share it with. That one really sucks as a woman. Because a lot of times I've heard the phrase, he took my best years. So a sorting question as a woman would be, how do you see this working? Are we supposed to build together and stay together? Or are we supposed to, are you supposed to have it already and then find the one? And again, watch for the liars, because a lot of times when they're excited, they'll say whatever they need to say to try to move forward. But if you can get a real heart space, and it comes back to one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard, which was how I met my wife, which was never go on the first date by yourself because you won't act like yourself.
That is great.
You'll present who you think needs to be showing up to get their attention or to create curiosity or excitement or whatever you're after. But if you go with a group of friends, you'll get to see who the person really is.
And that's how you all connected originally?
We met on a rooftop on a party. And I don't party. She used to a long time ago. And I was up there because my neighbor dragged me across the alleyway to her house and was like, come over, we're having a party. And I was like, dude, I don't even drink, so I'll bring a protein shake in the corner. So I was standing there just talking to people. She walked in and she literally knew it was going to be a wreck up there. And so she walked in knowing it was going to be a mess and just wanted to say hi real quick to my neighbor's husband, who they went to college together. And then she was going to leave. And she showed up, walked in, my neighbor ran across, grabbed her, said, girl, put a smile on your face. I'm about to change your life. Dragged her across the party and shoved her into me. And the introduction was, this is Jairek. He used to live in Africa somewhere. He loves to travel. He loves to volunteer. And this is Amanda. She used to live in Asia somewhere. She loves to travel and she loves to volunteer. Anyways, have fun, you two, and walked away. And so in San Diego, when someone says they love to travel, most of the time they've been to Los Angeles, maybe Las Vegas, probably Tijuana, maybe even Canada, like big jump there. They don't go far. They like Southern California. They don't leave a whole lot. And so when I said, oh, where have you been? And she's like, well, I did my MBA when I was working over in Thailand, and I went to Chulalongkorn in Bangkok, and then I did a little bit of work in China. And I was like, really? That's interesting. She's like, what about you? And I'm like, oh, I used to teach organic farming in a village in Africa. And you know, I volunteer with these organizations and travel like this. And she's like, really, where's the next place you're going? And I was getting ready to go on a 25-day, 10-country cruise I was teaching on. And she was like, I'm in. Where do I sign up?
Wow.
And I just looked at her and I thought of every person, because this is something I wanted to share with someone in life together. I wanted to share random adventures all around the world. This week is actually our anniversary, and tomorrow I surprised her. She's never been to India, so I'm going to take her to go see the Taj Mahal this weekend for our anniversary.
Oh, that's great.
But that's something that I'll come up with. I'll come out of my office and be like, you want to go to India tomorrow? And I need someone that goes, sure, sounds like a good idea. Why not? Let's roll. And if that's what I want to share with someone, I want to share the world. I want to share giving and contributing and traveling and all those things. So that was the thing I wanted to share most. And to have someone be able to say yes to that without any thought or things or any hesitation. And I was like, whoa, who is this unicorn? Like, poked her in the forehead. I'm like, who are you? And then I wanted to know, like, hey, wait a minute. Are you the type of person that just takes a travel trip anytime you can, but you really can't afford it because you're just waiting for someone to pick up the bill and take you everywhere? And then I realized she was in charge of a $4.2 million ad budget for a giant Fortune 500 company. I was like, okay, you don't need a man. Like, you've got life handled on your own. And you still want to go? Like, what about your job? She's like, I'll figure it out. I was like, whoa, this is amazing. Like, it came to life. I was like, holy mackerel. And what was funny about that was, rewind a little bit, I had heard this concept called a stadium pitch, which was when you're ready to find the person to take time to say, if you were handed a microphone and had 30 seconds to describe exactly the person that you're searching for in the world, how would you describe them so that any person who heard it would go, oh my gosh, I know who they are, and bring them to you? 30 seconds. And what was funny is the first so many years of my life, when I read out this list, it was everything I wanted from them. They'd look like this, they'd act like this, they would do these things, they'd be interested in this stuff. And when I got ready to find that person, it switched. Here's what I'd want to share most with them. And that was the only thing that fit into the 30 seconds. They would value the following things. And here's what I'd want to share with them.
Wow, Jairek, that's beautiful. I actually haven't heard it said that like that.
So I don't know if all this is helpful, but that was a 15-year journey.
It's truly actually like, and a lot of people do the list and joke about it being like, you know, a catalog list. And it is, when you think about it, actually, when I'm going through like clients and people that I work with, it is what someone can do for them, or what their, you know, their characteristics, not what you want to share with them. That's a great distinction. So in this description of you and Amanda meeting, does that mean that you're in the camp of wanting to find the person and build together?
Yes. And so part of what happened was, right before we met, I had to sit down and have some tough conversations with myself. Number one, I need to stop taking, because there was plenty of relationships I had had over those last so many years where I wanted to take. Either I wanted their attention, I wanted their affection, I wanted their respect, I wanted their connection, I wanted sex, I wanted something from that relationship, and I would go and seek it out. And I would do what men do, which is spend too much and present and portray myself as probably better than I was, to try to position myself in the right way so that I could get their attention. And even if you hear that last phrase, get their attention. And I had to have a conversation and be like, wow, I need to take ownership of this and not want to get anything, and be willing to just share because it's the right thing to do. And, you know, a man, my belief is, when they transition from a boy, they'll do what's right. And they'll be a good man. Don't have to be a nice man, but they'll be a good man. And a good man always does what's right, regardless if they're liked or not in the process of it. And there's something special about that, because when a woman can observe a man who always does what's right, even if they hate his damn guts when he does it, they'll respect the hell out of it. Because they'll be like, wow, That sucks,
Mhm. So
but I got to respect it.
what kind of environment do we have in a micro level, as in like with your partner, and more on a macro level in a culture that can support men showing up like that?
Um, in a micro level, there's pods growing in different places, uh, mainly in the self-help, spiritual, human actualization pods around the world. So San Francisco, New York, LA, these kind of places are podding together where you hear men taking off the masks. And I see something that's interesting. It's a theme going on right now, which is men need to get more in touch with their emotions. And I look at that and I say, some of them, certainly, some of them do. Some of them need to toughen the fuck up.
Mhm.
Like some of them need to get socked in the damn face and learn how to take a punch. And some of them need to learn how to shed a tear and not just pretend like their eyes are sweating. Like they need to figure out that it's okay to cry and it's okay to do that. And I think there's a balance somewhere in there where it's really looking at the individual and saying, okay, where is this man really strong and where does he need to grow? And how can we set up an environment that allows this human to grow? I think the same thing with women.
Yes. Mhm.
Women have gone on a whole pendulum shift where they burnt bras and said, I can do it myself. I think there's a great example of the evolution of men and women, and this might be helpful for how to help cultivate that in a microcosm or level. For women, let's say 13 to 30 years old, there's a new path that's been formed. Traditionally, it was temptress, meaning she figured out through her looks, her smile, her attitude, her sexuality, or her creativity, her intelligence, her intellect, whatever, how to get a man to do whatever the hell she wanted him to do. She could wrap that man around her pinky right around 13 years old. 13 to 30, she would use manipulation or influence, but manipulation to get what she wanted out of the world around her. So you see these young girls on Instagram who take a picture, and the first picture is, this is when I observe you. Second picture is, this is when I realize you have what I want. Third picture, smiling, this is when I get what I want. And
Hmm.
you go, wow, this is a young woman representing an absolute temptress in her life.
Hmm.
She uses her power to get what she wants out of men. Men do this too, different stage, but women in this stage get what they want out of men. Normally, if you're, let's say in school, and you have a best friend who's getting manipulated by another woman, women can see right through this crap. So a woman will smack him upside the head and be like, why are you falling for that? And she'll look at the other woman and be like, and you, what an idiot. Why don't you just do it yourself? Why are you manipulating my friend that I have a crush on?
Hmm.
And then you look at this girl and say, well, wait a minute. If she's not manipulating, what is she doing? And it's the secondary path, which is a tomboy. I'll do it myself. Smart enough, strong enough, talented enough. My dad taught me how to do this. My mom taught me how to do this. I don't need a man. I can do it myself. And she does. But she's frustrated that when she's doing it herself, she has a best friend that she has a crush on, but he's getting manipulated by the girl who's manipulating the tar out of him. And
Mhm.
she's irritated by it.
Yeah.
The temptress turns into a princess, which is the point in which she's tired of a man she can manipulate, and she looks for a man who literally is a good man. Doesn't mean a nice man, but a good man. Someone who does not bend with the wind, meaning he will always do the right thing. And she goes, whoa. Usually it's some moment in her life where she's introduced to him and she says something that he knows and she knows is ridiculous. And he just looks her straight in the face and goes, no, that's not right. I won't do it. And she tries every tactic she's ever used in her entire life, from tears to laughter to sexuality to creativity to smart to whatever, the pouting, the stomping, the yelling, and nothing budges this human. Then she calls her mom and goes, holy shit, what do I do? Nothing worked. Excuse all the language, but that's what happens.
Yeah. Mhm.
They freak out because they've never dealt with one of these before. And then eventually it's like, wow, I can trust him enough to show up for me when I need him.
Hmm.
And there's a correlating stage a man goes through. Or if she's not into that stage, she went from tomboy to now businesswoman. I did it for myself as a girl. I could do it for myself as a woman. I don't need anybody. There's a humorous moment that happens in this little capsule in these stages, where one day she's at the office doing all the paperwork, running the business, kicking ass at life, and she gets exhausted and ready to have a relationship. She's like, I want to go home and I don't want to have to make another damn decision. I want someone to take care of it. So she puts on her princess hat. She takes off her businesswoman hat, puts on her princess hat, and goes, okay, Prince Charming, you got 2 days. Show up. Checking her watch. Some sap on a horse rides by, and she goes, maybe good enough. Guy gets off the horse and says, can I be your Prince Charming? She goes, go for it. They start to talk. And as they start to talk, she goes, okay, this is going to go somewhere. The little sparks, interest. 7 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks later, let's fast forward. He's sitting on the couch typing on a spreadsheet. She looks over his shoulder and thinks, I could do that so much more efficiently. She covers her mouth and goes, men hate it when you tell them to do shit different. Don't say anything. Wait. She sees 3 more keystrokes and she goes, I can't take it. She goes, have you ever tried doing it like this? And points at his screen, which causes him to feel like he's challenged. And when masculine energy challenges masculine energy, it escalates quickly. Watch 2 guys challenge each other over the stupidest things, and it'll just escalate to the moon and back. And so he turns around and goes, no, that's not how I do it. And he's aggressive and mean about it, which causes her to cry and go back into princess mode. And now she leaves the room and says, you don't have to yell about it, and walks out. And he's sitting there going, I don't know what the shit just happened. I had a princess. She put on her business hat. She went, as soon as I talked back, she put on her princess hat and started crying. Who the hell was that? And what he didn't realize is she has the privilege, ability, and unique capacity to switch hats that fast, depending on how she feels in the moment.
And does he?
So he only has one path so far, and history evolves. Now, let me say, this is interesting. I learned it traditionally like this, and I had a gay man pull me aside one time and say, listen, I don't relate to this men's path, but I'm sure as shit a temptress. I was like, hey, that's interesting. Never thought of that. I said, what do you mean? He's like, I can get this shit kicking any time of the week, honey. If I want something, bam, I just get it done. I was like, whoa, okay. Maybe it's not a man-woman thing. Maybe it's an energetic thing, a feminine, masculine thing instead of man or woman. I don't know. But I've had a few discussions with people who said, I didn't relate to that, but I totally relate to this one. And I've had a few ladies tell me, I don't relate to those women's path. I'm not a temptress and I'm not a tomboy. Like, I don't feel that. But I do relate to this next path. And the other path is what was designated originally as a man's path or the men's path. And let's say 13 to 30, it's known as he's trying to best himself always. So no matter what he does, I always say he's climbing mountains. And what happens is he climbs the top of a mountain and he gets there and he goes, I did it. I got a date with that person. I started my company. I made $100,000. I traveled the world. I volunteered. Whatever it was, I did it. I climbed a mountain. And then he looks around and he sees another one and goes, ooh, what about that one? Then he goes down the mountain, climbs the next mountain and goes, I did it. And then he looks out and sees another one and goes, what about that one? And no matter how many mountains he climbs from 13 to 30, there's never a mountain that's good enough, because every time he gets to the top, he sees another mountain. And so the whole 13 to 30, no matter how many times he gets to the peak, he has to do another one. Insatiable hunger for more. Now, right around 30, he starts looking for a mountain that's worth investing his life into. Key phrase. Worth investing his life into, meaning he's not going to try it. He is finding something that's worth investing his life into. So he has to believe this is it. And so he finds the mountain and he goes, this is it. Because he realizes right around 30, when you get to the peak of a mountain, all you realize it's the same thing every time. Thin air and nice view. Thin air and nice view every time. And he goes, oh crap, it's always been the same. I just never realized it till now. And all of a sudden, he looks for something that's worth investing his life into, which is this next mountain he's going to climb. And he's going to invest about 15 years into it. And what his life is going to look like is work, breathe. Work, breathe. So if he's building the kingdom and needs to then share it with you later, these are the kind of guys that call you on Friday at like 3:45 and go, hey, you want to have dinner tonight? Which I've learned women hate, because it means he didn't care. He didn't think ahead. He certainly doesn't know how much work and time it takes to put you all together. None of this crossed his mind. But the God honest truth is his whole life is consumed by work, breathe. And if he thought of you in that moment of breath, it's important. It means he cares. But it doesn't mean say yes every time. It just means he cares. And he needs to learn some better ways to manage his time. And she needs to realize his whole life is work, breathe. The graduation from this stage, there's 3 layers of it. Eventually, somewhere around 30, 45 to 50, it's a tunnel where he feels like he truly did everything he was supposed to. And then he literally looks back at his entire life and questions everything. Was it worth it? Did it mean anything? Did it make sense? What was the point? Who cares? Do I even care about this? Does anyone else even care? Does it even matter? And they go through a stage of, we call it a midlife crisis, but a wild stage of deep questioning where they need space and they need a sounding board to just throw ideas at the wall and figure out who they really are.
I call this an awakening, like this phase.
Yep.
That it's and it's almost impossible to not have it in a lot of ways in a way that we're brought up. Sorry, go ahead. But yes, I'm so interested in the phase of life.
I think that also happens nowadays much younger in the 20s because of the way that culture has evolved. We don't have to focus on walking 3 miles to go get a can of water to bring it back and boil it to have a glass of water. We have much more time to think and not just survive. And as we're thinking more and evolving more and reading more and learning more, I think men at some points are hitting this way earlier and having multiple awakenings or questioning moments of their life. Women too. It's just an evolved society, meaning we've gotten to the point where we have so much space and time that we can be processing and thinking about this stuff constantly, not just at a later point in time where we then have earned enough time to actually process and think things through.
Yeah.
I think there's a possibility of having multiple awakenings nowadays because of how much space and time we have. And it's a privilege in society to have that much time to think. But in that,
sorry, go ahead.
So in that moment, they graduate the tunnel. They figure out what their one thing is. This is how you know if you found someone on the other side of the tunnel. There's one thing they're interested in. And it's like, well, don't they want to try new things? No. Don't they want to read other books? No. Don't they want to experience? Nope. Now, let me give you an example of someone like this. Think of like your 60, 70, 80-year-old grandpa. And when you have a family reunion, he's in one of 2 positions. The middle of the room, sharing his one thing that he always talks about, tells the same damn story every time you see them. He's sharing the one thing he feels valuable sharing for the world. And that's what he's sharing or giving or doing or helping with, because he feels valuable when he shares that thing, whatever the one thing is for him. Or he's sitting in the corner, hunched over, saying nothing to anybody because he feels the one thing he does or is or has or wants to share isn't valued in this room. If you want to give a beautiful gift to an older man in your life, go ask them about that one thing that you know they're into and let them talk for 4 days about it. And they'll feel so important. It'll light up their world again.
He'll feel seen and appreciated, and validated. So I know you have traveled a lot and have been around a lot of people and thinkers and influencers. Would you say your travels have influenced you more, like being exposed to other cultures, or would it be people that you've met along the way?
So traveling and cultures have given me deep respect for the fact that it's different in different places. As much as this conversation works very well for people in US, Canada, lots of countries, but mainly US, Canada, Australia, UK, Europe, parts like that. When you get into places like I lived in a village in Africa, and relationships are totally different there. If you have I remember how old was I? 20 years old. And these little kids were like, "Are you married?" No. Like, why not? You're rich. And I was like, I'm not rich. Like, I'm volunteering. And they're like, "Yeah, you're from America. You're rich." And I was like, no. I don't know how you come up with this. And it was just in contrast and comparison to the village versus, having the ability to fly around the world and come volunteer and all this jazz. And I was like, well, why would I be married? And they're like, because if you're rich, you can have a wife. I said, oh, that's how it works. If you have the ability to provide for someone, then you can have a wife. I was like, how interesting. Totally different. And I went and met the chief of the village. He had 6 wives. And all that meant was he could provide for a lot of people. He had resources that he could share with many wives and many children. I was like, okay, never heard of that before. We were traveling and doing a training over in Kuwait. And I remember talking to someone there and they said, well, here you're allowed to have multiple wives, but you have to do exactly the same for any and all of them. So if you buy one a car, you got to buy the other one's a car. You buy one a dress, you got to buy the other one's a dress. Like everything has to be the same. I was like, dude, I have a hard enough time keeping my one wife happy and taken care of and seen and heard and appreciated and respected and loved and adored. How the shit do you do it two? I was like, my head explodes. These men must be freaking talented here. Like I'm going to study men in this part of the world. Be like, how do you pull this off? I have a tough time.
And are you happy? Are they happy?
Does it work? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just different. Yeah. But I think as you go around the world and you see the way things are differently handled, you know, in America, we look at the concept of love, like two boiling pots of water come together and it's so amazing. And then slowly they simmer down as you lose the love, or you just lose, it just becomes normal. Versus in other countries, two cold pots of water come together through arranged marriage. And over time they learn how to boil.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, they become fascinated with each other as they learn about each other, and they learn how to make each other's pots boil for each other. I was like, what a different reference point.
Yes.
And so I think as you travel the world, you hear so many different reference points. And again, everyone's going to choose what works for them in some way, or sort. But it also brings up the topic of why do people, and this was a big one I learned from around the world and through a lecture I read about, which is why do people choose to get in a relationship in the first place? I'm like, that's an interesting topic.
Yeah.
And, as an evolution of myself, I was like, well, why do I want to get in a relationship? Well, I want to share something. But there's a lady who came up with 4 or 5 categories of why people choose to get in a relationship. One was companionship, to do everything together. The second was support, either to be supported by someone or to support the other person, mentally, emotionally, physically, financially, in some way, some combination of those. The next one was, she called it growth or karma, where it's like, I'm with this person because they make me grow, or I make them grow as a human. And then the last one was legacy. And legacy was, it's for something beyond us. Like we might not even like each other as humans, but we're together because the legacy will continue because we choose to be together. Which that one always makes me scratch my head, because I'm a companion person. I want to do everything with my wife. And I've met people who, they have different hobbies. They don't even like the same people. They hang out in different places. They don't do anything together. But the legacy of their kids, or the legacy of their business, or the legacy of their family's wealth, or the legacy of something causes them to be married. And I'm like, that's weird to me. I don't understand it, but I appreciate the fact that it can exist.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final 5th one she came up with was, it's like a deep romance, where these people are rarely in a long-term committed relationship because they believe that the purpose of relationship is to create this deep romantic experience for the other person. And it takes so much effort every time they're together to create this deep and profound experience that they can rarely sustain it in an actual long-term relationship. But it's fascinating when you see that stuff and then you compare it and think of those things and go like, geez, which one am I?
Yeah.
The screwy part is when someone who's a companion gets put together with someone who's a legacy, which I had a client this happened to. He wanted to do everything together. She could care less as long as the kids were taken care of. She wanted to go on trips by herself. He wanted to go on trips with her. She wanted to do stuff on her own. He wanted to always be together. This kind of sucked for him.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Oh, that is such a fascinating framework. And I agree too. I've done lots of traveling, and I feel like it's just to be exposed to the different ways, different values, different influences, and realizing that where you've been planted in so many ways has such an influence, but then having the ability to expose yourself to other things helps you distinguish more about who you are authentically, and to find those that are like-minded or different-minded to help you grow. It's a gift to be able to travel.
Absolutely.
So have you had, beyond what you've shared, have you had pivotal private moments in your life that have made you have those like real, like deep, who am I as a man, as a person, and where am I going? Have you had moments like that?
Yeah, tons. Tons. I think as you hit different transition points in life, so that point of learning that boys can transform into men, and then saying, hey, what's my ritual going to be?
Yeah.
And what does that even mean to me? How do I produce that in my own life? Because if it helps so many and it's something that's been ingrained in cultures for so long, but it's kind of been lost in our culture, how can I create my own version of it? And
Mm-hmm.
I don't need the village elders to come up with a way to transition me. Like, I can figure it out myself. I'm smart enough. I just got to figure out how to put it together and see what that would be. I think another really big decision I made at one point was, after a while of dating and never having a long-term relationship that just wouldn't last for some reason, I sat back and I said, wait a minute, if I'm not good at this, and it's a pattern I tend to do in my life, and I've noticed a lot of other men do too, if I really suck at something, I sit back and I go, okay, where do I have to read or study or learn to actually get decent at this? Like, I'm willing to be horrible at something long enough to become okay at it, and okay long enough to become good at it, and good long enough to become great at it. I'm willing to go through the process. I just need to know where to start. And so one thing that helped was sitting down and taking a piece of paper and saying, okay, I'm going to create my own personal PhD on this subject. I'm going to come up with how many books a year I'm going to read, and how many courses a year I'm going to take, and how many people a year I'm going to learn from and be mentored by. And I'm going to study all of it. And each year of studying as much as I could get on this, all those people became my mentors. And with every book I read, there was at least one piece of information from every one of them that went, oh crap, now I understand why this didn't work, why that caused tears, why this hurt, why this was so frustrating, why that never worked, why this always went the way, in a certain way it did. And as each of those little pieces came together, they were deep transitions as a man.
Hmm.
And some of them I talked about, the transition from taking to giving,
Yeah.
being a young guy who just got out of college and being horny and excited and looking around and seeing lots of good looking women and figuring out how to get sex, versus realizing at some point, I'm like, wow, I've started a relationship with these humans when I was dating them in my mind. And that sucks. Realizing that stuff like men, a big pivotal was men talk in possibility and women listen in promise. And so
Yeah.
a guy looks at a woman and goes, wow, you're cute. My mom loves sweaters like that. And she hears, oh my gosh, he must think I'm really serious because he's already talking about his mom.
Right.
And
Yeah.
when they break up 6 weeks later and she goes, you're such a liar, he thinks, what the shit did I lie about?
Mm-hmm.
You said you were going to introduce me to your mom.
You
No,
misled
I
me.
didn't. I said I liked your sweater and my mom would probably like those kind of stripes too. He talked about possibility, which was, in my mind, I could see the possibility of you fitting there in my mind in the future. Yeah, it's possible. And she heard, I promise in the future, you're going to fit there.
Hmm. Oh, I hear that a lot. Yeah.
That screws a lot of people over, especially as we get older.
Yeah. Hmm.
Older men, I've heard older men, when they hear that and learn it for the first time, think back and go, whoa, that's why they were so upset.
Yeah. So,
Because we like to talk in possibility, especially when we first meet someone,
yeah.
and we
Yeah.
don't realize all those promises we're making. So,
Hmm.
one tip as a young man that I learned was like, oh my God, even if they hate my guts, I'm going to zip my mouth shut unless I can say, I promise on everything of who I am as a man. Like, you can sledgehammer me in the man parts if I break this promise. I promise on everything that I will make X happen. If I cannot say that behind whatever statement I'm about to make, shut my mouth. I don't care if I get yelled at, cussed out, kicked out, whatever. I'm not going to let it come out of my mouth unless I can say I promise on all of who I am as a man that I will deliver on whatever I'm about to say.
Hmm.
That was hard.
Yeah. I mean, that is profound. And it takes, I think, a lot of support to get to that place of owning that and living that. And that makes me think of, Amanda, what kind of characteristics does a woman need to exude in order to protect and to experience a man like you're speaking of?
There's a couple of things. I mean, respect and appreciation are two huge ones. And these are things we've built into the culture of our relationship. Meaning, if she, I don't know, makes a smoothie in the morning for me, I will go out and thank her for taking time to do it. If I take the trash out, she will stop and thank me for taking the trash out. If I open the door for her, she will stop and thank me for opening the door for her. we've created a culture of appreciation and acknowledgement where every little thing we do, we stop and appreciate and acknowledge each other for. Everything. I make the bed in the morning. She stops and goes, thank you so much for doing that. I wipe the counter down. Thank you so much for doing that. Take out the trash. Thank you so much for doing that. And so we've built a culture where we constantly appreciate each other. And we built a culture where we've chosen, the Gottman University talks about this, we're turned towards each other. When either of us are working on something and the other person makes a bid for attention, we stop. I don't care if I'm in the middle of the biggest email of my life or the most important contract I've ever signed or the biggest deal I've ever worked on, doesn't matter. Or a client really needs me. I've ended coaching calls in the middle of them and said, listen, my wife needs me right now. I'll call you back when I'm done. Like, you can fire me as a client, but my wife needs me. And I'm okay with that. And so, realizing that, putting her first, and she chooses to put me first. And it's really hard sometimes, especially when you're in the middle of something really important and they pop in. And what's wild though, is when you choose to put that person first, the entire relationship changes, because now they champion you to work harder. Now they go, oh shit, I'm interrupting. No, go back. And they know they're first. So they don't have to constantly try to validate or worry or try to figure out if they're first.
Yeah.
And it changes everything. And I've lost a couple clients over it, and I'm like, oh, well, I'll make more money in my life, but my wife's number one.
So where do you think kids fit into that kind of number oneness?
It depends on the relationship. I know my step grandparents are a great example of this. They had many children and foster children all living in the same home. And there was a rule on mom and dad's day when they're by themselves. If you knock on that door, like, there better be blood gushing out of somewhere. Otherwise you're in deep shit if you interrupt. And it was just their time to sit and talk and be. I remember one time I was staying at their house for a summer, and I came home and they moved my stuff to the side house, and they said, here's some money, go see a movie and don't knock. And they shut the door, and I was like, whoa, what just happened? And I was like, wow, they learned to put each other first. And obviously there's a stage of life where you can't do that, where the ones are so little, they depend on you. But I think there's a layer in there of not becoming emotionally dependent on getting all your needs met from another source, so much so that you ignore your spouse, which men and women are both guilty of, because it's scary to have to go to your spouse to get love or connection or those things. And again, it's getting. I think there's a layer underneath that, which is taking time to fill yourself up, which is really hard as a new parent, extremely hard, probably the hardest time to do it. But taking time to fill yourself up so that when you go to your spouse, you're going to give, not get. And when you're full and you have an abundance and you're sharing, if they want some of it, great. If they don't want some of it, that's okay. You're already full. You're not trying to fill up from them. It's the hardest time. I coach a lot of men in that new parent mode. That's the hardest time to do this. Hardest time. And every kid makes it a little harder. When you're 6 kids deep, it's a little harder than 3 kids deep, and a little harder than 1. And in that process, it's difficult, but it's a practice.
Yeah.
And it's saying, okay, when I didn't sleep, when I'm beat up, when I'm tired, exhausted, frustrated, and hurting, what are some little biohacks I can use to get myself back to my best? As a man, go take a 3-minute ice cold shower. I guarantee you'll clear your thoughts real quick. Go outside, stick your bare feet in the grass or sand and ground with the planet's energy. Take 5 deep breaths and then flood yourself with the moment you fell in love with that person, and ask, am I full? And if you are, what can you share with this human right now? And then go back inside, only focused on giving to them. Same thing for a woman. It's a little different. Ice cold shower might not be as helpful. But find your way to get right back to the place where you're full again. And as a man, when a woman comes to you, I saw a beautiful little quote about it, where a husband's asking a wife, do you need anything? And the list behind her head is saying, a back rub, a foot rub, help with the kids, help cooking dinner, need to eat, need to shower, need to sleep, need to do everything. And then she goes, no, I'm fine. I was like, ooh. And if a man learns to settle for that and not see the fact that she needs other things, and to just show up and deliver regardless if she's asking or not, especially if she says, no, I don't need anything, but he can feel how she's feeling and he chooses to go beyond that barrier and still show up and deliver regardless if she uses it or not, there's something special. If you're sitting next to someone and all of a sudden you say, "Are you cold?" And she goes, "No, I'm fine," but you see goosebumps on her arm, go get the damn blanket.
Mm.
Don't think about it. And if she doesn't want it, she doesn't want it. That's fine. She'll set it next to her until she does want it, or if she might not ever use it. It's not about getting the acknowledgement of you did something. It's about knowing there was need and you filled the gap, regardless if it was even brought up or mentioned. And when you can get to that place, it means you're very present and you're very aware sensory wise to what's going on in the position of the room. And you're able to serve needs without them even to be spoken.
Hmm. Great. Jairek, thank you so much for your wisdom, for your thoughts on things, and for your time. I have one last question for you. It is, if we were to talk again when you are 70 and we were to watch this video, what would your 7-year-old self, what do you want him to think of the man who's talking today?
He was at the beginning of a long journey. As much as he knew, there's so much more he was about to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so great.
Um,
I
I
love
don't,
thinking about what we're doing now to help our 7-year-old self or our older self too. And what I see in you is lots of life learning and giving, and having that be a huge part of your journey ahead.
thanks. I love to learn, love to share. And anything we're sharing is just what works.
Mm-hmm.
We go by that philosophy: learn it, live it, give it. And anything we're sharing is stuff I've learned somewhere. I've applied and lived in our own relationship, and either it helped or it didn't. And then heading forward, hey, in where we are and what we're doing right now, this stuff really helped. There's lots of other stuff we learned about that might not have helped as much, or might be more helpful 4 stages forward from where I'm at right now. But all the stuff that we've been able to talk about today, and thank you for having me. It's been a privilege to share. All the stuff that we've been able to talk about are all the things that have just worked right now and really helped us with where we're at.
Great. Thank you so much, Jairek. I so appreciate it. Happy anniversary. Have a beautiful trip to India. And thank you also for joining Dr. Juliana. Thank you for listening to Man-Made Conversations with Good Men. If you are interested by what you heard, please press the like button and comment in my YouTube channel and subscribe to the series. We'd also love for you to comment and share on social media platforms. If you know a good man or are a good man, contact me at drjulianamorris@gmail.com. It's drjulianamorris@gmail.com, or let me know of your recommendation in the comment sections. Thank you for joining the Conversations with Good Men, Man-Made.